Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today I am going to melt the entire football internet YouTube world because my number 7 team in my 2023 Deep Dive series is the Philadelphia Eagles. Dun 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 dun. Or however it goes. Oh, I'm about to make a lot of people angry. Make sure to like and comment and subscribe. So you don't miss any of the future videos, and that we boost the algorithm here and we get some conversations going surrounding this Philadelphia Eagles team because they are my number 7 team. They are my number 2 team in the NFC, so that gives you a little bit of an insight into what I think of some of these teams remaining in the AFC. But yeah, it's all very good. It's all very close. It's all very close. You know, just everyone relax. Calm down. Calm down. They're going to win a lot of games. Their offense is absolutely amazing. Probably the best in the league. If they have their quarterback take an extra step forward, it's all based upon Nick Sirianni. I mean, he did lose his 2 coordinators. Good for them. Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Gannon, the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Both coordinators gone. They did, I believe they promoted from within. So there's going to be some continuity here. Which is important for Jalen Hurts to continue to develop. They completely rebuilt the starting backfield. They let Miles Sanders go. They brought in Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift. So their early down work is at least going to look different. They're bringing back one of the best offensive lines in football. And they added a lot of really good pieces on the defense. Jalen Carter, they hit a home run. As long as he stays under the speed limit, they got probably the best player in the draft. They also got Nolan Smith, who isn't going to see a lot of playing time, I don't think, early in his career just because they have so many guys. They have so much depth on the defensive line. But it's a tremendous depth piece nonetheless. It's a high level. He's a starter on most other teams. Their linebacking group is a little questionable. Miles Jack, they signed him, and then he retired almost immediately after. So I don't know what kind of guaranteed money he just siphoned off of them, but it is what it is. They're bringing back a cornerback duo that is aging. So when does that regression happen for Darius Slay and James Bradbury? That I think should be maybe more of a concern, but they also added Keely Ringo, who at this time last year was cornerback 1, and they added Eli Ricks as an undrafted free agent, who at this time last year was probably cornerback 2. So they have replenished in a tremendous way, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Perhaps the only position is linebacker, where really they only have Nakobe Dean at this point. They did bring in Zach Cunningham at the beginning of training camp about a week or 2 ago. And I think he's going to get some significant playing time as they got rid of Davion Taylor. They don't really have a whole lot of depth there. We'll get to that. But this is a team full of depth. A.J. Brown looking to have another great season. And his production is going to really be the deciding factor for Jalen Hurts and his further development as a passer. Nick Sirianni has, he's one of the best. He seems to have like a swagger to him, but he does have to bring up 2 brand new coordinators. But like I said, luckily it's all the same system, so there's going to be a smoother transition than most when you see a team lose coordinators. Rarely do you ever see a team lose 2 of their coordinators to head coaching jobs in the same season. Usually that happens year to year. But that just speaks to how strong the Eagles performed last year in a strategic sense. People can talk about Jonathan Gannon in the Super Bowl, but everybody allowed 30 points, it seemed, to the Kansas City Chiefs. And, some, interesting calls go the other way, and the Eagles would have won the Super Bowl, perhaps. But, so it's the way the cookie crumbles. I'm a Giants fan. This is probably the most dangerous team in the entire NFL. I think that they are more dangerous than the Kansas City Chiefs. in that they're so deep in so many key areas where teams that are good and then suffer injuries, like on the offensive line and defensive line, a lot of the times teams will fall apart because of that. Now, obviously, if you lose Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata, you're going to have some problems. Obviously, if you lose Jason Kelsey, or if you lose, Hassan Reddick, obviously you're going to see a downgrade. But they're such strong units that they're going to still probably, unless it's a absolute emergency room of a position group, they're still going to be operating in the top 10 in the entire league in those groups, even if they take on an injury to one of their top level starters in one of those groups. And that is a tremendous job by the front office, Howie Roseman, to build this team. I think he's really put all the pieces here in place for this team to be successful for a long time, because that's one of the hardest things to do, is to be successful for a long time. They seem to have created a formula through smart trades, through drafting really smart as well, to create an environment where now, as their players age out or potentially get injured or both, they're going to be prepared with a guy who's actually pretty high level. And putting those tremendous talents really out of the gate with a head football coach who seems to really excel at developing these traitsy type players. And we'll start right now with that coaching staff. So this is my number 7 coaching staff in the NFL, which is still a very high ranking with 2 brand new coordinators. But that's just how good Nick Sirianni is, and how good the staff in general was last year, where they were probably the second best coaching staff in the NFL, if not the best coaching staff in the NFL. I would probably argue that they might have been the best collective, just because of the steps that we saw from some of these players like Jalen Hurts, who I think there was a lot of question marks surrounding going into the season. Unlike guys like Andy Reid, who had Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce already, they kind of had that going for them. And even like Brian Daboll, and as a Giants fan, Brian Daboll I think deserved to win Coach of the Year just because of how far exceeded the expectations were. I think people still had expectations of the Philadelphia Eagles to do really well, so that's probably why he didn't get Coach of the Year. But I wouldn't have necessarily been shocked if he did. And there's a huge task ahead of them. He's got 2 guys who now are in charge, and he does take on a CEO role as a coach. We saw Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon get hired because of his more hands-off approach on both sides of the ball, that then gave teams like the Colts and the Cardinals the confidence to be able to hire these guys to be their new head coaches and to take their teams into the future, and elevate their teams the way that they feel those guys elevated the Philadelphia Eagles. So Brian Johnson has to take over from Shane Steichen. So he's got the task of not only making Jalen Hurts the type of player to repeat what he did last year as not only a runner but a passer. More importantly, he's going to need to improve Jalen Hurts. He's going to need to create strategies and scheming Jalen Hurts into being even more effective. And now when teams have had this entire offseason, I think more importantly within the division, they've had this entire offseason to really prepare for this Philadelphia Eagles team. They've had all this time to pick apart the tape of Jalen Hurts. So it's up to Brian Johnson to bring something different to the table that these teams haven't been hyper aware of. I think that when you have quarterbacks in the division like a Dak Prescott, these organizations within your division have had plenty of time to sort of build on Dak Prescott, which is probably why you saw a little bit of regression from Dak last year, is because they sort of were able to pick him apart finally. And I think that Jalen Hurts is now going to take up that mantle within this division of being the quarterback that the Giants, the Washington Commanders, the Dallas Cowboys focus on really picking apart. There's going to be a huge amount of targets on this Eagles team's back that they're going to have to overcome with two inexperienced coordinators. But they're not short on talent, so I think that will, in turn, protect them and maybe hide some of their deficiencies, at least early on in the season. And they'll come in with sort of the element of surprise probably, because I think that it would be smart for Nick Sirianni to set these guys up to come out with something a little bit different than what they had drawn up last year, to throw off some of these teams, at least early in the season. And then you hope that they can learn on the job, see some success, and that Sirianni will be able to really galvanize the entire staff together the way that he did last year. And I think he does have the ability to do that. And like I said, talent sort of wins out here. And these guys are set up with all the talent in the world. This is probably they were probably the two most desirable coordinator jobs to take in the entire league last year. The offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator job for the Eagles, just based on that alone, and the potential that this team has going forward for years to come, how set up they are. And Sirianni has created a culture where, you see him, playing for the cameras, the television cameras in the middle of playoff games. He's really set a culture where this team plays with a lot of confidence. They play with a lot of swagger. It's like a new age, new generation type of attitude that they've come with, because he is a younger head coach. So he does have a little bit, probably some more relatability to the players than, say, a Bill Belichick does these days, where Belichick can't really run that type of ship. He has to run the ship that he's comfortable with, which is more military-esque. While Sirianni can run a bit of a looser program there, where he's almost one of the boys, but still an authority figure. And I think that creates for an environment where a lot of people want to play. We've seen Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox virtually take pay cuts to stick around. Darius Slay, sort of the same thing. These guys want to be there. They almost were able to retain Chauncey Gardner-Johnson under the same guys, but that, of course, didn't work out in the end. But to create this type of a culture where you have these guys who could probably make significantly more money elsewhere, at least in the short term, that's the sign of a really good culture. And that's going to, make the ears perk up of other veteran players come the offseason for years to come. And that's going to create, I think, a lot of long-term success. And Sirianni's a big part of that. So now let's look at the quarterback position. And Jalen Hurts gets an 84 as a passer. He really came along. He took a huge stride from the year before to last year. A lot of that had to do with the weapons and getting more experience with them, and I think that he's in a position to take another step forward. I think if he peaks, though, as a passer, he's still pretty damn good. I think he's a little bit better than Lamar Jackson overall. But there is always the possibility that was just a one-year thing, and that you give these teams an entire offseason to prepare for him, that he might regress a little bit, like we saw with Dak Prescott. Marcus Mariota has not had a good preseason. I think he's much better than what he showed in the preseason, but still not good. Not good at all. And I loved Tanner McKee for the last two college football seasons. I thought that he had the potential to come in and be a traditional NFL quarterback. Now, the problem is that because he's in Philadelphia, he was almost a luxury pick for this team. And I do think that they will keep him over a Marcus Mariota because of, I think, youth. And also, you can bring him out there and run a basic offense with him. Marcus Mariota is, you kind of have to have an offense that's tailored around him. Kind of like, ironically, what you have with Jalen Hurts. But I think that if Jalen Hurts for some reason goes down, you can put in Tanner McKee, run a bare bones type of an offense, a basic run offense, play action pass, intermediate play. He's not going to give you anything as a runner the way Jalen Hurts is, so you would lose a lot of that offense there. But I think that Tanner McKee, coming from Stanford, he almost does fit the mold of what the NFL backup quarterback position looks like, which is a guy who's really smart in the film room and like a high IQ player more so than a high talent player. And there is a difference there. You know, you got Brian Hoyer, who's like that high IQ player. He wasn't really ever the best quarterback in terms of talent, but you could trust him that he'd come in, he'd know what he was doing, he'd know to get his reads. It's just a matter of the type of execution you'd get from him wasn't what you would get from a starter quality player. And that's where Jalen Hurts comes in, who has such a high upside in terms of being a passer and his ability to run that it opens up an offense to be so incredibly dangerous. You never know what play is going to get called because you have a quarterback who on a 3rd and 15 can bust out a 20-yard run. And it could be a 20-yard designed run for all you know. Not usually, but it can be. And the teams always have to respect the quarterback run. They always have to respect the read option. They always have to respect an RPO. They always have to respect a trick, some type of trick play because of the skill set of Jalen Hurts. And that makes it so effective. And that's really what drives the success of this offense overall. And you take a look at the rushing threats, he is the best rushing threat on this team as well. He gets an 88. It's not the best quarterback running ability. That's reserved for Lamar. But then he's still the ultimate threat. He's somebody that could give you close to 1,000 yards rushing a year if you needed. And then they got DeAndre Swift, who needs to, his health is a red flag, as is Rashad Penny. So they revamped the backfield with 2 injury-prone running backs, basically, who have had some great moments in the league, but have not been able to sustain it. So they're bringing in these guys, making them a committee, basically of early down backs, and hoping they can get some high-level production out of them. Which, I mean, you give Swift gets 800 yards, Penny gets 500 yards, then you get another 700 or 800 yards from Jalen Hurts. What is that? Over 2,000 yards right there. So that's something that can realistically really happen with this run game. And you don't really, in this offense, you don't need a star running back to have this offense work. You just need a running back who can stay committed to running in a hole, will run hard, and get you 5 yards a carry. And even in the receiving game, you have Kenneth Gainwell, who is really under the radar, an underrated guy who I think as a receiving back, as like that quick twitch guy that you have back there who can make a big play when you need it out of the backfield, whether it be from a screen pass, whether it be from whatever. He's another guy that's just like, I'm surprised that they brought in DeAndre Swift. I think they brought in DeAndre Swift for the reasons I mentioned earlier about the injury issues. But Kenneth Gainwell as a number 2 running back, I think is pretty good given his skill set. Then they have Boston Scott, who I think they just keep around because of how well he plays against the Giants. I think that that's a thing because he seems to not really play at all during the season. And then he comes out 2 games a year and just lambasts the New York Giants football team. So he's one of those guys who's like, I think as time's gone on, I think Kenneth Gainwell and him are very similar. And Gainwell, I do think, is a better player in that sense overall. I don't think that they're too concerned about who's going to be the running back at any given time, though. You can see the receiving back abilities that I have here. They're all within the same range of one another. Even as runners, I got Swift 83, Penny 75, and then, probably like high 60s would be a guy like Kenneth Gainwell, and then maybe somewhere like just, low 60s would be a guy like Boston Scott for those first and second down true running back type reps. So there's just so much versatility here where you can really have any of these guys in the backfield with Jalen Hurts and you're not tipping your hand as to what is happening. And that's a huge advantage to have. Even if the grade here for a receiving back is only 70, to have any of these backs on the field at a given time and have the defense have to respect still the run and the pass, that's something that's not common in the NFL. Usually if you get a guy like Derrick Henry, you're like, if this is a freaking pass play to him, chances are he's running a screen or he's not doing anything fancy at all, and the ball's probably not going to him. But then, or if you get a guy like who's a true great receiving back, like Cowboys put in Deuce Vaughn, likelihood is it's going to be maybe a little pass play, or it's going to be something where you spread them out and then try to run it that way. With this, you can come out in any formation with any personnel, and it could be you can run your entire playbook. And that is, again, along with the versatility of Jalen Hurts, something that makes this offense so effective. So now going to the receivers and the tight ends, and what a group, right? A.J. Brown gets an 89, high-end number one receiver. Then you even got Devontae Smith, who on most other teams is a number one receiver as well. Dallas Goedert, great receiving tight end. And then Zacchaeus, who there was a bit of an injury scare the other night. Turns out he is going to be okay, though, from everything I've read. So I expect him to come and be wide receiver 3 and take a lot of slot reps alongside, maybe running a 2 tight end set, and we'll get to that. But you have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, 2 very different players. A.J. Brown looks like he could eat Devontae Smith as a snack. Just the size difference is fascinating to see. But they're 2 very different players, require 2 very different types of cornerbacks and types of coverage shifting and everything to accommodate for them, which does allow, again, Jalen Hurts. It makes his job a lot easier. Where there could be some problems now, this is really one of the very few weak points of this roster, and that is the depth, specifically at wide receiver. They got nothing. There's nothing here to speak of in wide receiver depth. If they lose one of these receivers, it's going to be an uphill battle. At that point, do you run a lot of 2 tight end sets to get a guy like Dan Arnold on the field, who would be your next best receiving threat? Grant Calcaterra, the 3rd tight end on your roster, is, to me, a significantly better receiving threat than your 4th wide receiver. That is an issue. That is an issue that has to get solved in camp, whether it be Quez Watkins or the rookie Joseph Nagata. Somebody needs to step up and be that wide receiver 4 and a confident wide receiver 4 on this team, or they're an injury away from this receiving group falling apart. It's probably the only group that they have where if they lose one of their starters, it gets dicey, truly dicey, where you're like, there's a significant drop off. There's not really that guy that you can plug and play that you're confident is going to be able to produce at even like a wide receiver 3 level. Like these guys, like Joseph Nagata is your 4th best receiver by my estimation, as an overall receiver, and he's like a wide receiver 5 or 6 on a lot of teams. There's some teams where he doesn't even make the team, and that's a problem. So that's where this coaching staff is really going to have their work cut out for them, is developing these underneath depth wide receivers to make them quality and passable NFL talents at this point, because Quez Watkins has gotten his opportunities and he's never really taken advantage of them. He's had moments, but for the most part, he's been quite poor. Tyree Cleveland has really only been special teams. So Joseph Nagata, maybe as a rookie, he can come in, the system might fit him, he might find a role in it, and he might gain some confidence, be really smart in the film room during the week, and be a good depth piece that hopefully they never have to use. But I do think if you're an Eagles fan, you're watching A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith every time they get tackled, and if it's a big hit, you'd be holding your breath anyway if you're any other team, but I think it would be especially crippling to lose one of those guys based upon this. Now we're going to move on to the offensive line, and this is probably the best group in the entire NFL across the board. Like in pass blocking, just look at these grades. The worst pass blockers are your 2 guards, and they're 77. If you go back and watch any of these videos, 77, that is not a low grade for me. You got Jordan Mailata, who's an 80. You got Jason Kelsey, give him an 83. And then you got Lane Johnson, probably the best right tackle in the entire league to this day still, especially in pass blocking. Maybe not so much in run blocking, but in pass blocking, you couldn't find me a better right tackle in the NFL than Lane Johnson, a Hall of Fame talent. They got 2 Hall of Fame offensive linemen still starting for them if you include Jason Kelsey in there as well, even though on his podcast he'll tell you he's not a Hall of Famer because not a lot of centers make the Hall of Fame. He's the best center of this entire generation, and this isn't even his best skill set is in the passing game. That's not even what he's really that good at. But because he's got such a high football IQ, as these 2 guards are next to him, whichever one needs his assistance, he's going to be able to assist with double teams. He's going to help put them in better position to succeed as well. And Jalen Hurts is going to have all the time in the world for the most part on a lot of occasions to just pick apart defenses. And this is what really is going to make this passing game go, is how solid this offensive line is. Because I don't care what quarterback you have back there. If that quarterback is good enough to make an NFL roster, you give him this offensive line, he's going to have all that time, and every quarterback in the NFL, with given a certain amount of time, is going to be able to pick apart any defense in the NFL just based upon the speed of the game, the rules that defensive players have to abide by, etc. So this group, just eat your heart out, guys. No shade can be thrown on this group at all, and even some of the depth pieces, Brett Toth, Tyler Steen, the rookie who they drafted out of Alabama, who again, just sort of like a luxury pick. He's going to be a right tackle, probably the backup right tackle, even though he's written in right now as a backup guard. I anticipate that with Lane Johnson's injury history, maybe they're expecting him to step down. Jason Kelsey, I think, is another guy based upon his age, and he's sort of played around with retirement as well, but they have Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens, who are the 2 starting guards, who were both centers in college. So they got 2 guys there that could kick into center. So then you got Tyler Steen, who they draft this year, where in the event that, next year, of course, they're always drafting 1 year ahead, this team, that they lose, say, Jason Kelsey to retirement, Cam Jurgens kicks into center, Tyler Steen goes to right guard, and your offensive line is still as complete as ever. There are some things that Tyler Steen does have to work on. He is obviously a rookie, but that's why you draft a year ahead the way that they have, so that way you can develop that. Jack Driscoll is more of a run blocking guard who's written in right now as a tackle as well, but I do think that him and Tyler Steen are sort of interchangeable at the right guard and right tackle positions at this point. The real competition is going to be from the other 3 offensive linemen, Toth, Opeta, and Cameron Tom, to figure out who else is going to make this roster. Because they have 7 guys on 7 offensive linemen that if they were starting, I would feel okay with as the Philadelphia Eagles because of how strong the starting 5 is. In general, if you lose even 2 of them, Steen and Driscoll, I think, are still passable starters to pick up some time, pick up a couple games here and there, even Steen as a rookie. What you're getting from the other guys is still just not... I would be concerned about it. And even in the run blocking, not an orange rating in sight. They got Jason Kelsey, a 90. Jordan Mailata gets an 81. Lane Johnson does drop to a 75 in run blocking, but that's still really good. And then, of course, the 2 guards who have been playing out of position their entire NFL careers because they're both centers. What do you know, right? Still really good in the run game. And having a guy like Jason Kelsey in the middle sort of coordinating the whole thing is going to make them better. And they don't have to be the best when you got the best center in the entire league, the best center of the generation running the show for you. And then 2 really high-quality tackles next to you as well. There's a whole lot of space for these guys to continue to develop with not a lot of pressure on them because there's going to be guys there to sort of make up for maybe a little misstep that they might take every now and then. Even some of the depth, this is where Tyler Steen does need to drastically improve his game, is in the run blocking. I think putting him at guard in training camp is a good step towards that, though. He's going to be working on some pulling techniques a lot. He's going to be, working on double teams and all that kind of stuff Where at tackle, depending on what the play is, you're kind of just dealing one-on-one usually with a defensive end. This is, I think, going to make his run blocking ability much more well-rounded as time goes on. I think that's kind of what happened with Jack Driscoll, to be honest, which is why I think he's much better in the run game now than he was probably when he came into the league, is because he's played guard, he's played some tackle, he's sort of gone everywhere, learning different techniques on how to execute plays and blocking schemes from multiple positions just because of the team that he's had the opportunity to play on. So overall, they got 7 guys, and then probably Brett Toth is number 8 at this point. Opeta and Cameron Tom really going to be competing. I anticipate they'll probably only keep 9 offensive linemen, if not just 8, because as we get to the defense, you'll see they need a lot of room on this roster to maintain a lot of this talent. So just going over the positional summaries real quick. I mean, the most complete offense in the NFL, I would say. Passing, top 2, top 3. Running the ball, top 3. I think they can get some better production from their tight ends in the blocking. I think that's something that will hold them back just a little bit. But with how much of a running threat Jalen Hurts is, it sort of allows you to spread it out a little bit more, spread the defense out, and then run some of those read option plays to then open up the run game in that sense, where you don't need to necessarily run a truly traditional 5 lineman, 1 blocking tight end running game like a lot of other teams in the league do. And you see it reflected here in their score, the number 1 offense in the NFL for me. Second best passing offense, third best rushing offense. They're going to score a lot of points. For me, the only talent-wise they got it all. To me, it's really what is this brand new offensive coordinator going to be able to do, and how well have teams prepared in the offseason for this offense. That's going to be the real deciding factor in really everything. Now let's move on to the defense, and you start with the edge guys, Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat. Reddick is sort of this hybrid edge rusher linebacker. He's almost like a Micah Parsons in that sense. I think he's not nearly as good as an off-ball linebacker. I like him as just line him up and let him rush the passer. Josh Sweat's like your do-it-all, all-purpose, 3-down defensive end. I think he's going to get a lot of playing time, a lot of snaps. Then you got Jalen Carter, the rookie who they drafted 10 overall. He's your 3-down interior defensive lineman. He brings so much in terms of an interior pass rusher. He brings so much as a run defender, which we'll get to. And you play him on these passing downs next to the veteran Fletcher Cox, who's not quite the player he used to be, but the football IQ can't be taught. You can't just expect a guy to have football IQ at this point. You have Fletcher Cox who can now teach Jalen Carter. I don't mean football IQ can't be taught. Obviously it can. But I mean, you can't buy this type of veteran leadership for a talent like Jalen Carter to play next to. And not even Jalen Carter, but other guys as well on the interior like Jordan Davis. But you look at and then you got Josh Sweat, who took a while for him to come along, but I think he's really found himself now in this team. And then even as a defensive end pass rushing rotation, you're going to have Haason Reddick doing this. Even if you take Josh Sweat off the field because he's done so much work on first and second down, you got the veteran Brandon Graham, and you've got the rookie Nolan Smith, Nolan Smith is really more of a backup to Haason Reddick, while Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat are sort of backup and starter rotation amongst each other. I could still see a world where you got Reddick and Nolan Smith both on the field at the same time rushing the passer, and that's a lot of speed. Not a lot of size, which I think eventually teams would be able to exploit, which is why I like a Josh Sweat or Brandon Graham to be on the field, and maybe Nolan Smith and Haason Reddick to not necessarily share the field at the same time. But that's so much speed on the outside. Even on the interior, you have second-year player Jordan Davis, who came into the league where it was like, he's at least going to be a great nose tackle. So you got him, Fletcher Cox, and Jalen Carter as like your 3-man interior. And do not sleep on Moro Ajamo if he can get his attitude right, and make this football team. The interior defensive lineman out of Texas, I'm a big fan of Moro Ojomo. I think a lot of people that were involved in the early draft process, like YouTubers and stuff like that, would say the same thing about him. But there was all these stuff about his off the field crap and just having like an attitude problem from what I've seen. Some, the type of the off the field issues with a really talented player. But look, just the depth. The depth is phenomenal here on passing downs, where you can have so many different combinations of guys out there, and you're still a high-level front four against the pass. Just going to be nightmarish for these offensive coordinators. Now we're going to the defensive line against the run, and still, I think Jalen Carter is going to come in. He's going to be much better, against the run. You got Jordan Davis reuniting the two Georgia guys on the interior there on early downs. Josh Sweat does stay on the field for me. Maybe Brandon Graham comes in, and this is where you move Hassan Reddick, I think, to more of an off-ball linebackers on these early downs. Because this is where Brandon Graham, I think, is really going to make a lot of his impact moving forward, just on the way that they've built the defensive end / edge room. Because he is the best choice there. Hassan Reddick, as you don't want him as a traditional edge necessarily. You have him an off-ball linebacker in these situations, I think, is a lot wiser. And then Nolan Smith, Derek Barnett kind of is what he is at this point, sort of overpaid. But Nolan Smith, this is where he needs to develop as well. And I think because he's sort of in the same scenario as Hassan Reddick, because they are the same type of player almost. So maybe they can come along together in that sense, and one of them maybe figures out a way to do it, and the other one picks up on it, and they can, raise each other up. And then even on the interior, Fletcher Cox, age, not what he used to be, still effective, still really effective. And Moro Ojomo, again, he's another guy, scores really highly for me. So just the ability to have this type of a rotation of the big guys up front, and to still have guys in there that are going to be really good talents when they're on the field, that's really going to make this defense super dangerous and probably make up for some deficiencies they have at the second level. Because we do look at these linebackers, and this is where the deficiencies are in the defense. Sort of like on the offense where the deficiencies were wide receiver depth, the deficiencies of this defense are clear. It's at linebacker. They lost TJ Edwards, and now they're bringing Nakobe Dean here, who they drafted last year in the 3rd round. Georgia player, what do you know? Who's now linebacker 1 for you. They signed Zach Cunningham to give us like a veteran presence out there, a guy with some experience, but a guy who's definitely on the back end, dying days of his NFL career, barring some type of out-of-nowhere resurgence. But these are really the two guys that are going to be seeing the bulk of the playing time. On passing downs, I would say that these two will be the ones on the field. And then I would say also on early downs, Hassan Reddick bounces back to be the 3rd linebacker in a traditional 4-3 defense. The depth, again, just whatever. Miles, you kind of lost linebacker 3 with Miles Jack retiring today, which is when I'm recording the video. He retired today. And then even when the run game, Nakobe Dean, I think, is a little bit better in the run game, but Zach Cunningham's a little bit worse. So it's just, it is the hole in this defense. But that's why the strength of that front four is that much more important. And it's good on Howie Roseman and Sirianni and the collaboration there of putting this team together, that they were able to see these deficiencies and build around them. And that was maybe easier for them to have a really strong front four than maybe reach for some linebackers in the draft instead. Because, they could have easily, instead of taking Jalen Carter, they could have traded down again and then taken another linebacker. They could have taken a guy like Deion Henley in the 2nd round. They could have taken Trenton Simpson in the 2nd round. There's a number of things that they could have done, but, they chose otherwise. They could have taken Deion Henley or Trenton Simpson with their second first-round pick instead of taking Nolan Smith, but they made a decision to commit to that front four to make up for the deficiencies and allow Nakobe Dean to maybe develop a little bit more, play a little bit more instinctual because of the strength up front. But I just don't like the depth pieces here. I think as an immediate group, this is one of the lower end groups in the league, which is weird to say for a team that in pretty much every other group is on the higher end. Now we're going to move to the pass coverage with the defensive backs, and we'll start with the 1-2 punch there. Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Still pretty good, but I think that this is a group where you have to expect some type of regression from them. Avonte Maddox, a really solid slot corner. For them, they brought Terrell Edmonds from Pittsburgh to play a more strong safety role, which was vacated by Chauncey Gardner-Johnson leaving. And then they drafted Sidney Brown out of Illinois to be the free safety. Kayvon Wallace is going to be part of that rotation. Reed Blankenship, who came out of nowhere. They got a really good, almost evened out safety group in terms of initial talent. So it's really going to be the best two guys play. And they're in a position where they can ride that hot hand. And they got a bunch of different skill sets, which is really advantageous for them. But let's go back to Slay and Bradbury, who have been one of the best, if not the best, cornerback duo in the NFL since they got together last year. As they age, when that regression hits at the cornerback position, that's a really dangerous period if you're not ready for it. But they're ready for it because they drafted Keely Ringo, who I cannot believe fell as far as he did. They have Josiah Scott still, who's like their backup slot corner. And they have Eli Ricks, who they picked up as a undrafted free agent. So when you have Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks there, you almost have your future 1-2 corner punch, you would hope. Whatever happened to Eli Ricks during last football season at Alabama, I don't know what that was. But at this point last year, him and Keely Ringo were cornerback 1 and cornerback 2 for a lot of people in the draft community, both professionally and, internet-wise. And then, like I said, the safety group, Kayvon Wallace, Reed Blankenship, it's such a healthy rotation you can put together, at least on passing situations. When we get to running situations, it might be a little bit different. But in terms of having guys out there on these passing downs, you can really put the two guys that best suit the matchups that you're seeing from the team you're playing against, which is a gigantic advantage for the defensive coordinator. Now taking a look at the run support, and this is what I was talking about. Sidney Brown, the rookie out of Illinois, I don't want him out there at all. This is Reed Blankenship time, really. The two outside corners is what it is. Avonte Maddox, again, very good nickel, very good slot corner. He's going to bring you some strong play out of that spot in the run game. Keely Ringo is another guy who's going to give you some solid performances there. Eli Ricks definitely needs to develop in that sense. But like I said, Reed Blankenship as an early down safety, I would have him out there over a guy like Sidney Brown, and then in the passing game, probably take him out for Sidney Brown. And then you have Kayvon Wallace, who can sort of float around across all three situations, even though you wouldn't be opposed to having Reed Blankenship on the field on passing downs. I think Kayvon Wallace is a little bit better in that sense, like you saw in my grades. Jobe and Garner, I think they're going to make their future on special teams if they do make the team. But I guess you can say that Eli Ricks is the outlier here because he is not very good at all in the run game. So is his undrafted status, whatever issues he had at Alabama last year, is that going to rear its head here in Philadelphia where teams are going to be a lot less forgiving, especially given the depth that they have? They even got Josh Jobe, former Alabama corner there. So there is the chance that Garner makes the team over Ricks. If all goes well, I would definitely keep Ricks over Garner, just because when you're dealing with corners, you want the guys who are the best cover guys at the end of the day. You don't want to if you're deciding like, oh, this guy's better against the run, this guy's better against the pass, when it comes to defensive backs, you're always going to take the guy that's better with the pass. So there is that. But Keely Ringo being cornerback 4 on this team is just absurd. It's really absurd. And I expect him to make the transition away from one of the top 2 corners they have right now extremely smooth for the Philadelphia Eagles. And so it's going to be a nightmare throwing against them for a long time. So taking a look again at the positional summary, and really the only issue on this defense is the linebacker group. Everything else, at least on paper, looks really good. There is concern, like I said, for the top 2 corners. When does that age regression start? You hope it doesn't start this year. But if it does, you do have some preparation for it. So the depth is, you got 1 or 2 guys that you can put in there. That's perfectly fine. You got depth at safety. You got depth on the interior. You got depth off the edge. It's just a well put together team and group. So they're my 9th overall defense in the NFL, the 7th best pass defense, really led by that front 4. They're the 14th rush defense. It is close, but again, led by that front 4. And if they get some better linebacker play than what is being projected, if having such a strong group up front helps Nakobe Dean channel a different gear, then this could easily be a top 5 defense in the NFL as well. And I think that will be something that would elevate them to the next level. So here, taking a look at their schedule, I have them going 12-5. And I mean, look at the teams I have them losing to. All teams that are going to appear later on in this series, that are going to have higher rankings than them in this series. Frankly, I think there's only one team here that's missing. Yeah. There's just one team that's ranked higher than them that they don't play this year. So I do have them losing to the 5 teams that are ranked higher. Kansas City on the road, the Jets on the road. I got them losing to Miami, Buffalo, and San Francisco. I have to say, I mean, is it completely unreasonable, Eagles fans, for me to have those as the 5 losses? I got them sweeping the Giants, sweeping the Cowboys. I got them beating Seattle. And they got a lot of their other games. They're not playing really good teams. New England, Tampa Bay, Washington twice, the Rams, Arizona. They got a pretty good draw considering their talent level. So, I feel like 12 wins. I might have 12 wins. This might be the low end for this team, really. I think that they just might have had some bad luck here in the way that I simulated the season, to be honest, because, could they beat the Jets and the Dolphins? Yeah, I think that they could. Could they beat a team like San Francisco? Yes. Assuming if San Francisco doesn't get the safe quarterback play that I think we're all expecting, they could definitely catch a team like San Francisco. Just because of the front 4 and the questions for the offensive line that San Francisco is going to have. How good is Kyle Shanahan really at being able to get around some of those skill deficiencies? Buffalo coming into Philadelphia. That could be a situation that I think they could pull off as well. So they could easily have 12 wins as they could have 15, 16 wins. Which pains me to say, but this is just how it ended up being drawn out here. This is almost the worst case scenario for them coming true. So running them down again, 12-5, first in the division, second in the conference, 7th in the league overall, 7th coaching staff with the number 1 offense in the league, the 9th best defense in football. Just a really well put together roster, lots of depth with very few deficiencies. And only really one potential cause for concern as the season goes on, and that's the age of the top 2 corners. And there you have it. My number 7 team in my 2023 Deep Dive Series, the Philadelphia Eagles. Big-time Super Bowl contender. Probably the first true Super Bowl contender that we've actually covered on this series. I think, people can say, oh, there's a bunch of Super Bowl contenders. To me, there's 7, and this is one of them. So leave your hate comments in the comment section. Leave a thumbs up to help with the algorithms, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the future videos in this series. I appreciate you guys, as always, coming back and watching. We are winding down. Real football is just on the horizon. Video there. And thank you. I'll see you guys next time.